Confucius was born in Qufu and is buried there. His tomb is a place of veneration and is located in the Kong forests, where you can walk through beautiful sprawling gardens and see the Kong family monuments and cemetery. In post-Mao China, in 1981, as a foreigner, I was an unusual sight to the people of Qufu, which was then a small village. I went, of course, to Qufu to see the tomb of this famous scholar and stayed in what was then the only accommodation available to foreigners, the Kongzi Mansions, several streets away from the main area. I stayed in the older Ming Dynasty section. The place was run down and the gardens had been left to grow wild. There was a large tilled area of the garden where someone had planted out corn and vegetables. In the evenings, there was only me and a Canadian taking dinner in the enormous main dining hall. The courtyard was so large it took several minutes to cross, and the chef, who was also the dishwasher, gave me a small alcohol-fueled lantern to get me safely back to my room across the way. The room was as it had been with very little alteration all these centuries, merely to patch up leaks and hang communist posters. The floors did not meet the wall, a uniquely Chinese design to allow easy cleaning by flooding the stone floor with water and sweeping it out into the stone drains of the courtyard. The room was tiny, with just enough space for a single bed and night table on which to put the lantern, and my tiny travelling clock with its luminescent hands. It was winter and very cold. Snow fell the first night and floated into the room through the spaces between wall and floor. My feather quilts did the job, and I slept well until I was awoken by the sound of footsteps and voices. Hazily, I woke to whispered voices and soft footsteps on the stones outside the door. I sat up in bed and saw in the space between the wall and floor the feet of people. Passing, a light behind them to project the shadows. A flickering light, as if the lantern were not a modern one. These were no ordinary feet passing by. I leapt out of bed and looked upside down to see who these people might be in such a solitary place at this time of night in such cold conditions. The feet were beautifully shoed, elaborate shoes of fine embroidery reminiscent of the late Ming Dynasty clothing. I knew my Chinese history and had studied many Ming and Qing paintings in the galleries of Shanghai and Beijing. But the feet were so small. Bound feet. Women of wealth. The hems of their gowns were richly embroidered with gilt edging and pink peonies. Their voices were hushed and they laughed lightly, as if they were talking of the night's events in the main hall or going to meet illicit lovers. Their Chinese words were ancient. This I knew because at that time I was fluent in Mandarin. The lanterns flickered and they were gone. I was still hanging upside when the severe cold and shock hit me. Privy as I was to such apparitions from 400 years ago, or perhaps more, I was shocked rather than frightened. I looked at my luminescent clock face and saw the time, 3:03 in the morning. What chilled me then was the cold, and I leapt back into bed and woke long after the dawn. Taking breakfast in the main hall alone, for the Canadian had left, I tossed up the idea of asking the chef, the dishwasher, if he or the woman who lived there to clean the rooms had ever heard or seen anything unusual. In these still communist days, it would be a difficult question to ask because people were especially guarded when talking about anything out of the ordinary. I did ask, and he laughed out loud. "We get many visitors," he smiled. This was an obtuse yes. So others had seen them, and it wasn't pure imagination. The Qufu of today is greatly changed with its new hotels and fancy restaurants. I like to think that the Ming women still wander the compounds of the old mansions whispering, gossiping and giggling in the early hours of the mornings, with the light of a lantern spluttering in the cold winds.